So why aren't you just like blinding me 10,000 times brighter than the sun? I shouldn't even be able to like stand next to you. It's because you're using all of that energy to stay alive.
Exactly.
Life is the shine. Like to be alive is to be 10,000 times more energetic than the sun. Whether you're a houseplant or a human, you are so many thousands of times brighter. And so life is the physical manifestation of light made into particle.
I'm so excited for today's episode with Dr. Zach Bush. Dr. Zach Bush works at the intersection of longevity, health, and nature, and he implores us to reconnect with nature as our source instead of fighting against it to become healthy and whole once again. And in this episode, we went into a deep dive around what happens when you are in the meat grinder of life, the tenderizer, the dark times. We talk about surrender. We talk about mitochondria and how we are literal light beings on a microscopic level. Oh my goodness, it was beautiful. So enjoy the episode with Dr. Zach Bush. Welcome to Plenty. I'm your host, Kate Northrup, and together we are going on a journey to help you have an incredible relationship with money, time, and energy, and to have abundance on every possible level. Every week, we're going to dive in with experts and insights to help you unlock a life of plenty. Let's go fill our cups.
Please note that the opinions and perspectives of the guests on the Plenty podcast are not necessarily reflective of the opinions and perspectives of Kate Northrup or anyone who works within the Kate Northrup brand.
Hi.
Hi, good
Thanks
to be
for being here. So I just want to say thank you, first of all, for the work that you do. It has impacted me greatly, and I've really enjoyed listening to you evolve over, it's only been 4 years that I've been along for the ride, but I've enjoyed it. And it's like so palpable. Whatever's been going on for you since I first started listening in 2020, you've changed. Obviously, we've all changed in the last 4 years.
That's not like cycles for me,
right?
And I live a life that way. I actually really seek that out. I'm always looking for what do I need to let die within myself, and to do that, you have to be in community, and human relationships is a powerful mirror. And so you've watched me go through many death cycles, and I've gone through another one this week. Like it's constant. If you really welcome the universe in to do the purification game and stop believing we can just detox in saunas and realize we got to actually detox the human emotions and the wounds within us, then that takes that human emotion, that human relationship, that human energetic connection, and that leads to a whole lot of brokenness, being revealed. And we have to have a high degree of patience towards ourselves and others around us, and towards each other to go through that. So I think that's been my real training ground. And that began when I stepped out of the university setting academically, and it began when I stepped out of the marriage relationship and realized I couldn't repeat that pattern. The Course in Miracles was showing this other path for humanity, and I've been stumbling down this like blind path with no lights on is how it feels. And it's like, so what you're watching is somebody who's constantly deconstructing further and further in their knowingness of how the world works in a desperate effort to find the bottom of the fall. Like, how far do I fall before I find something solid, something that is going to be me? And so I'm doing this long fall into myself, and it's painful, and it's, self-destructive for sure, but it's also, emotional at times. It's exhausting at times. But once you start to realize that the benefit is that you get to see more of beauty, every time you take more, death and take on more of this energetic burden of allowing nature to do its deep work. Nature does such deep work, the way that fungi work in the soil systems, the way that these things, they dig in and they don't let any darkness stay unturned, and darkness is churned over into light by the microbiome of soil systems. And so what you and the world have witnessed, anybody who's been paying attention to me, is, wow, that guy is self-destructing all the time. And it's been tough.
I've not been in your life. I barely know you, but it's feels like a meat tenderizer.
Very good description. Yeah, that's perfect.
So,
yeah.
Who knows what's been going on? Obviously, share as much as you want or as much as you don't. But that piece around the composting and the taking what we would consider waste and fertilizing it into new growth is absolutely critical. And I have been through many a portal where I feel like I am dying, and that beauty of meeting people either in that or when you've come to the other side, like the level of compassion available when we've just been brutalized.
Yeah.
Emotionally, logistically, like whatever, physically, you know, it's beautiful. And it's really hard. So anyway,
Yeah,
I just
I think that's
like,
the human journey right there in a nutshell.
It really is, yeah. Okay, so you just had a birthday. It's a new moon. We're in a turn of the seasons right now. Today we're recording this on Samhain. It is the time when the veil between the worlds is the thinnest. So in terms of just like, what did you learn about yourself and life this week that you would like to share in this particular birth portal?
Well, it's been one of the more intense meat grinder weeks of my life, so it's a good one to ask in some ways, you know. And so, what have I seen this week? You know, looking through the veil. My birthday falls on Halloween, and so it has this funny way of any birthday I have, I start to dread because it's like, oh, I'm going to see all the stuff again, and
your soul really
so
chose
it's just
that.
like, wow, that's a really intense way to like recognize a birthday when you like recognize how much death needs to happen before you really do rebirth, you know. So it tends to be a cycle for me. I stopped liking my birthdays at a very young age for reasons I didn't understand, and then as I got older, people were like, you should really pay attention to your birthday. You should really celebrate. You should make plans. And the universe just laughs at me every time I make a plan for my birthday. It's just like just ridiculous. And the more I'm like, I really need to take a break, like people say, and I need to like really do self-love, like I'm told. The universe is so excited to even grind me harder into the pavement at those moments. So I'm realizing that just falling without a belief that I deserve a break or need a break or, you know, whatever it is, and allowing the journey to be the journey, I'll get through it faster. Because every time I like grab onto the side of the river and be like, okay, I just don't want to flow for a while. That's fine, but pretty soon you get tired of holding onto the bank, and then you go, and now you would have been 2 days further down the river.
Right, you still have to go through it.
Yeah, so you're back in it. So I think that's what this week has felt like, of like, wow, the moment I feel like my companies or the nonprofits are in flow and things are working, financial, you know, upending, whatever needs to happen destabilizes the system again. And so we have to be very transparent right now as humans to one another that it is a complete disaster. Like everything is melting down right now. And we like to look outside of ourselves and say, oh, the politics is terrible, therefore I feel like I do. Oh, the economics is terrible, therefore I feel like I do. Oh, that person was you know, not respectful to me, or, you know, didn't want to date me, or didn't want to have sex with me, or whatever the things that people come up with in their heads, and then that becomes the reason they feel the way they do. And so it's this constant looking around for the justification of what's happening inside of ourselves that we can't learn the lesson. And so we continue to hurt each other by continuing to point at each other to justify the way we feel inside. And so it's knowing that or saying that is so easy, but then living that day in and day out is, am I willing to completely own what's inside of me and my full experience? And this week, one of my great mentors, he's an amazing teacher within the Kabbalah, which is ancient math that predates Judaism, predates Israel, predates, you know, Sanskrit, ancient wisdom that came to the planet. And so it's a mathematical, kind of energetic philosophy of the way the universe works. And in that, he was asked by one of my colleagues as we were sitting around the table, is there free will? And he said something that was just so perfect for this week that I'm in, and I think this moment that we're all in as humans, because there's not a human on earth that's like having a pleasant time of this right now. Like, it's just tearing us to pieces. And if we would just say that to one another, instead of like, hey, how are you? I'm good. No, nobody's good. Nobody's good. Everybody's leaving their jobs, giving up on their jobs, giving up on the people they thought they trusted.
Getting divorced. Getting sued.
Starting the companies they always thought, therefore running out of money, getting sued, getting canceled by people you've never met.
Getting cancer.
Getting cancer.
Yep.
Like, everything's just whacking us upside the head right now. And he answers this question, is there free will? He says, well, from the perspective of the human mind, being as limited in perspective as it is, it's going to feel like you have free will. But from the divine perspective of the universe, it's impossible that you have free will, because you're the result of such an amalgamation of astrophysics and planetary physics and life itself. And like, there's quadrillions of inputs into your expression on a daily basis. You don't have free will. But you always have free will to exercise how you feel within your experience.
Yes.
And that really is the whole meat of it, is like, am I willing to have free will as to how I'm going to feel right now about the experience I'm having?
Yes.
And my free will then allows me to say, oh, it's everybody else's fault. And the more public they are, the easier it is to say, oh, that's the person who's at fault. Or am I going to realize, like, I am the amalgamation of the nature within me. So if I have hurt within me, if I have pain, I can blame it on some trauma that was external to me or that my parents experienced when they were children. Or I can recognize that in me right now is a lack of coherence with my divine nature, because nature doesn't have stored trauma. Nature heals and transmutes all the time. Humans in our separation from nature have learned to store trauma. And so that's our own responsibility. Either we stay detached from nature and refuse to give it back to that nature that we might call God, we might call it a river or a mountain. We just holding on to all that stuff and not giving it freedom to metabolize through nature, then it's going to cause disease. And so this is the trap we're now stuck in, is in our nature deprivation that we're in, this nature deficit that we've developed as a society that decided nature was against us. So we developed houses that don't have fresh air. We have houses that don't touch the ground. We have, schools that have 5G towers on top of them. Like, it's like, clearly, at no point did we think we were integrated in nature when we designed the society we live in. And so for that, we are storing all this trauma. So we have to take radical responsibility right now, and we're going to need radical amnesty. And interestingly, we're going to have to forgive the people that look most like a demon to us, because they're the ones that we've all piled the most stuff on. And in this event that we're at here, if I was going to say one name that would raise the ire of this place more than everything else, it'd probably be something like Anthony Fauci or something like that. And so I can say a name like that and feel the whole room go, which I did in my talk a little bit ago. And
just for fun?
Just for fun, to just point out, okay, you just did that. And you have a narrative in your head that a bunch of us created together saying it's his fault. When we look at the situation and we look at 40 years of effort to educate the public on the risks and benefits of vaccines, about 4% of the US population was concerned about vaccines in the beginning of 2020. Anthony Fauci came along and presented a really fractured message, and one that appeared really not founded in reality. And he showed all of this vagaries and inconsistencies, would contradict the CDC's recommendation one week to the other. NIH, the whole thing was such a mess that within 6 months, 46% of the United States was concerned about vaccines. So he in 6 months did more for the radical consciousness of that inward question of, should I believe that pharmaceutical companies just have my best? People
weren't thinking about it.
They weren't thinking about it. It wasn't on their radar. There was just blind trust.
Totally.
And so if it takes an ego like that one to come along and say, hey, what are you doing? What is your relationship to this thing that doesn't have any science to it? That is saying, hey, actually it's experimental, but we're going to roll it out and make it mandatory globally. Very clear about it. So it's not his fault in so many ways. He's like, you could say he created a fear paradigm. Yeah. But the fact is, it was the society buying the story in some sort of fashion that made him a demon and made the vaccines the demon, without, again, taking the honest evaluation of, why do I feel vulnerable to a virus that's been here for all of human history? Why do I suddenly feel violent? And so then we create these stories of, well, it's military attack, it's this or that. And it's like, oh, well, that's why I'm afraid.
Right.
No, you're afraid because you fundamentally think you got abandoned by nature at the very beginning of mankind.
Yeah.
That's your fear.
You're afraid because we forgot who we are.
Because you don't know who you are as a human, and there's this deep, deep insecurity. And so everything is playing out with these external stories of fear. And so those that we have demonized the most, when we meet them on the other side of the veil, I think we will have the most, it's not even compassion, we're going to ask the most apology for. I didn't realize that I was seeing myself in you, and I demonized you, whether you be a Kamala Harris or a Donald Trump or
whoever.
It's just whoever you've now put on that platform that you're going to say is the abuser, that you're going to say is the power player. Like Donald Trump didn't wake up one day and say, I'm going to take over the power of the world. People had to give that power over to a person like that. And so we are building each other up so we can destroy each other. That's human behavior at the most, because it's all an expression of this fundamental wound. So I really appreciate the question, because I feel better right now than I did when I walked into this room, because you asked me to express it. And so by externalizing all of the pain and heartbreak that's in me from all of the things that have been thrown at me this week, and, long relationships in work, like my core teams are been going through upheaval for 2 years now. But to see another round of that turnover, the human has to go through the grief process. Yeah. No matter what they're throwing at you or who they think is evil or why you're getting, you still, all of that emotion of like, oh, I'm being attacked aside, you're grieving the loss of friendships, and you're grieving the loss of the end of camaraderie and the being in the trenches together and all that. And so I just want to recognize everybody right now, if maybe you be a fractal of me, that I am feeling so much heartbreak right now, and I am feeling so much sorrow for the fundamental collapse of communication that we have within humanity. The people that we feel like we are communicating with the best with, we just are not communicating at all with. And so just know that I feel all of that for you. Each of you, I know that just the struggle of speaking to your spouse or your children, these things that you hold most dear, and you can every day feel the block of energy, and it's not their fault, and it's not your fault. It's a fundamental human experience. And so we are right now in a deep, deep state of fundamental disconnect, because we lost the mycelial network of nature itself. And so this takes us into the soil story that you were wanting to bring forward, I think. But I just appreciate that space, because I just think it's important for us to all meet in the pain for a moment and just be like, okay, this is universal. We can release the personalness of it, of like, oh, I'm the problem, or I must be a bad person, or I'm not good enough, or all the easy things to trigger. The hard thing is staying at center and being, no, I'm a perfect being. I know I am. I have experienced that space, and I know it on a daily basis that I can find center. And there's no like bad element of me, and probably not of Anthony Fauci or anyone else. And so what's keeping us from this coherent showing up of sovereign beings? And for that, I value and am grateful for the meat grinder that's grinding me away this week again. I'm like, thank goodness, because like you said, it does feel so good to come through in another cycle of that. And then you just take a deep breath at some point, and you're just like, oh my God, I remember how I saw the world, and it wasn't true. Thank God it wasn't true. Thank goodness that my narratives were all BS, and thank goodness my defense mechanisms were keeping me blinded, because I finally learned the lesson. I took down the blinders and I learned my lesson and things, and now you're gonna go have a little moment of spring, and then I guarantee you the meat grinder will show up.
Comes again.
And so, and the faster we're willing to receive that, then the deeper the work we'll get through in a single lifetime.
Well, when you said the piece about like, okay, I could cling to the side of the riverbed, but it's like, or the river, whatever the bank, but in the end, it's like I still have to go. I could have been two days downstream. I mean, it really reminds me of birth, and that obviously you haven't given birth, but I know that you have stood by, as many women have, and that it's like that feeling of, this is so scary. This is a sensation that I have never experienced before. Yeah. I feel like for sure I'm gonna die, but then also so much life coming through. And it's like, the more you hold back, the worse that is going to be. So as we are born, so we live. So there you go.
Yeah, and it's such a good. I mean, it's exactly right. And labor pain, obviously, the child does not, push down that vaginal canal without the contraction. So every contraction we get in life is there to push us further, out of this canal. So
and they end. That's the other crazy thing. It's amazing. It's like I feel like I'm going to die forever, whether it's a life contraction or a birth contraction. It's like I know when I go in those dark places, I'm like, I'm going to feel depressed forever. I'm going to feel scared forever. This is my life now forever. I live here now. And then, just like you said, the sooner I'm just like, all right, so go all the way.
Yeah.
And it's like, maybe it's not over immediately, but there's more space. There is more space.
Yeah.
When I just am like stopping resisting the feeling that it's, do you know Dr. Shefali Sabari?
Not personally.
So at the beginning of COVID, I was having like a really hard time, just with the babies crawling all over and the no childcare and the trying to work, right? Everyone else is obviously doing the same thing. It was hard for everyone for a number of reasons that were different and the same. And I texted her and I was like, Shefali, I need a therapist. I'm losing it. Like, I'm losing it. Who do you recommend? Like, who's a therapist? I need help. And she was like, do you have 5 minutes to FaceTime me right now? I was like, yes, I do. So we get on FaceTime and she was so funny. I will not do her accent because I would not do a good job, but her voice is so beautiful. And she was like, Kate, you now work in 3-minute increments between your child asking you for things and giving snacks. This is your life now. Your children are now part of the furniture. You now work like this. This is your life. And you resisting the isness is making it harder. This is the isness. Just be in it. And honestly, it was so simple, but I was like, oh, okay, thanks.
Yeah.
It just
Stop waiting for a different normal.
Stop
This is your normal.
Stop waiting for your life to begin when it gets easier. Like, this is life. This is what's happening. Welcome.
Yeah.
And
how do you want to show up?
I don't want to even say it got easier per se. Like, I don't think you would describe it as it gets easier when you don't surrender, when you do surrender. But there's like maybe more space or something? How would you describe that?
Yeah, I think there's more energy, first of all.
There's
we're putting so
more
much energy into the angst of the thing.
Yes,
and then suddenly you have bandwidth.
It's a waste of energy to resist.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
You get more bandwidth. You
get
more
more
energy back.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm making a hard left, though it's related. I want to talk about mitochondria. Since we're talking about energy, right? So it's
right
all a metaphor, right? But it's also literal biology. What are you like learning about? What do you know about mitochondria right now? And the reason I ask is because I just learned 2 weeks ago, I'm sure you already knew this, that mitochondrial health is critical to our nervous system health. Because of course, our nervous system runs on energy and it is mitigating every system in our bodies. And that's important. Like, our mitochondrial health is related to that. So what's happening with our disconnection from nature? Why is mitochondria so important? What should we know about our energy reserves, literally, and then of course metaphorically, if you want to go there too, because I love that.
It's the only way to talk. Okay.
Perfect.
So the mitochondria is the center of my area of expertise scientifically. I was an endocrinology metabolism
I actually didn't
specialist.
know that, so I'm glad I
Yeah, that's perfect. So the study of metabolism is the study of mitochondria when you're dealing with multicellular creatures. So in bacteria, fungi, single-cell creatures, they use fermentation to create energy. Mitochondria were a huge innovation in life because it suddenly improved by 10x the amount of energy could be produced per cubic centimeter. And so that 10x allowed for multicellular life to coordinate itself. And so it's kind of like a city. Small town, no problem. You got a couple generators, you can keep things going. 250 million people living in a continent, let alone 25 million living in a small area like Los Angeles. Now you have an energy crisis. You need a lot of energy to get that multicellular creature to work. And so same thing for an animal decides to have 70 trillion cells that are all interconnected and working in subspecialties. And so you got your utilities department, you got engineering, and you got transportation, and you got all those sectors working in the body, and they have to not only become what they are, use the resources they need, but they need to coordinate from everything else. And so communication, as anybody who knows, anybody ever been in a relationship, 90% of the effort of a relationship is communication. And you don't actually do much together. You just communicate because it takes so much communication to even be near each other. And so that's the phenomenon of life, is it takes so much energy for two cells to coordinate and behave synergistically to create a common endpoint that life takes an enormous amount of energy. And so mitochondria were a very important jump so that we could become an earthworm or a human, whatever was going to happen. We've recently come to appreciate how much energy that is. And ultimately, this is the definition of life in my book. So my perspective on life now is that life is kind of this boundary event between physics and biology. The brightest thing that physics can do is the sun. The brightest thing that humans do is the egg, the ovum of a human being. And so If we compare those two, let's not even go to the egg immediately. The average human cell has 200 mitochondria. 200 mitochondria, if you look at a biology textbook, they always show you two. There's 200 mitochondria packed into the cell, and those are bacteria that have reproduced inside of your cells to create energy.
So they're not really, they're a different species living
They're
in us, creating
bacterial
the
species.
energy.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's very much like soil. So we've all come to kind of appreciate that the gut is full of microbiome soil. What we haven't come to terms with is that the whole body is an organic garden. Every single cell is packed full of bacteria. Because we don't like to think about bacteria as anything but germs, calling them bacteria inside our cells was uncomfortable, so we call them mitochondria. And so mitochondria are a rebranded bacteria. And so we might as well call them bacteria, to be honest. But so your average cell, 200 of these guys. Specialized bacteria, though, the difference between your gut microbiome and a mitochondria is, again, this 10x improvement in energy efficiency, because the gut microbiome is doing fermentation. The mitochondria have figured out how to, in collaboration, actually, two bacteria got together to form a single mitochondria. So mitochondria are actually two species that have interwoven themselves into a single expression. And that mitochondria is doing respiratory production of energy rather than fermentation. And in that oxygen-carbon exchange of respiration, we get this 10x improvement in energetics. And so the first nematodes and little tiny, multicellular creatures, parasites and the like, were required to have this upgrade of energetics to start to coordinate more complex life. Humans have this extraordinary density of microbiome, our gut being a good example. We have the most complex ecosystem of any animal on the planet, and any ecosystem within the planet dwells that diversity within the human gut. And so the human colon is the most diverse ecosystem on the planet by species. 40,000 bacterial species, maybe 500,000 fungi, yeast, etc. So per cubic centimeter is just mind-boggling, more than a rainforest, coral reef, you name it. And so life is this extreme concentration of energy made possible by the mitochondria and the bacteria in a smaller form. So bacteria inside your cells and the bacteria outside of your cells are producing enough condensation of energy to allow life to happen. So this really starts to get at your question of where does energy come into this whole equation? If we don't have energy for a relationship between household members and your kids are driving you crazy and you're about to lose your mind and the things, and well, that's exactly what's happening in every human body right now. The immune system's overwhelmed, has so much taxation on it. Every time you eat, breathe, things, too much is coming in. The barriers have fallen down. There's no healthy boundaries. Everything's overwhelming your immune system. Autoimmune disease occurs. Chronic inflammation occurs. Whole thing is in total inundation. And so it's definitely long past psychotherapy. It's like in the psych ward now, in complete psychotic state of, I don't even know who I am, and so I'm going to start attacking everything. So your immune system is now making you the enemy. And that's happened to my own company now. And so I'm watching the immune system that I thought I had around me attacking me now, saying that I'm the problem and that I'm the disease. And so that's such an interesting thing to watch happen at the macro level that I've been studying on the microscope for all these years, and we're going to keep repeating this pattern. We're going to find that moment to outsource the problem and then attack it, not realizing it is us. And so this milieu is happening down at the microscopic level. And then comes this glyphosate moment in 1976 where we develop an antibiotic to grow our food in. And so now this antibiotic called glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup, 4 billion pounds of this herbicide are produced annually and put into our soils. It's hard to wrap your head around 4 billion pounds of a tiny, tiny molecule. We're talking about so much of this chemical on the planet that it's dwarfing everything else in a lot of ways. And so this chemical has become so ubiquitous. It's waterborne, so it's in our river water, it's in our rainwater, it's in the air we breathe, it's in the food we eat. It's literally inundated biology itself. It's in our fossil aquifers now. It's in my own cells inside of me, so that we've just become awash in this chemical. And its fundamental damage that it does to humans is to decrease the mitochondrial light production. And so mitochondria, since 1976, have been diminishing their life force every single day/year at a higher and higher rate. And for that, we've seen the collapse of human biology and a 10,000-fold rate increase of extinction of species across the planet, because we're literally putting the lights out on life. When life can no longer concentrate energy, and we now know that fermentation of bacteria can do it 1,000 times brighter than the sun. So a cubic centimeter of bacteria churning away in fermentation are producing 1,000 times more sunlight than a cubic centimeter of the sun. And then you go to mitochondria, 10x that, 10,000 times brighter than the sun. So why aren't you just like blinding me 10,000 times brighter than the sun? I shouldn't even be able to like stand next to you. It's because you're using all of that energy to stay alive. And so to create life. So life is the shine.
Exactly.
Life is the shine. Like to be alive is to be 10,000 times more energetic than the sun.
Wow.
Whether you're a houseplant or a human, you are so many thousands times brighter. And so life is the physical manifestation of light made into particle. Einstein famously said light can be a particle or a wave at the same time, blah, blah, blah. So you can shine, but you have to let go of your particle for a moment. And you do that every millionth of a second. And so a human at the atomic level is becoming particle, then wave, particle, then wave, particle, then wave. So you shine every millionth of a second, shine, particle, shine, particle, shine, particle, shine, particle. So you do shine, but just for a split moment, and then you're back to particle. And that's why we know you as a body. And so you are a human body animated by an energetic mathematics that remembers who you are in between the millionths of a second when you disappear. And so you keep reordering to you. And so this is what we might call a soul. It's an energetic imprint of space-time that says this is going to be Kate, and it's still Kate. And Kate never wakes up thinking she's Zach, which is pretty amazing in and of itself.
That'd be
Lucky
weird.
you, it'd be a bad nightmare. But this is the phenomenon that we're dealing with is, oh my gosh, we have self-identity at this energetic level that's expressing biology because we can concentrate so much light energy because the mitochondria are so full within our cells. And so the mitochondria's job is to break apart double carbon bonds and release sunlight. Plants' jobs is to take CO2 and store sunlight between those carbons. So we call that glucose or carbohydrates, we call it fatty acids. Long fatty chains and long carbohydrate chains are just stored sunlight, and your mitochondria are releasing that sunlight back inside of an organism so that it can shine and do its thing that we call life. And so we should really quickly figure out a society that's not founding our food system on a chemical that lowers the light within our humanity. The symptoms of that lowering of the light, the lowering of the capacity for the mitochondria to take your potential energy and turn it into light, has been mapped out in 8 billion people. As soon as it started happening in 1976, within 5 years, we had a global obesity epidemic begin, which has been rolling across. 10 years later, we have autoimmune disease rolling across the entire species. A few years into that, chronic pain syndromes leap out of nowhere. Suddenly everybody's developing pain for no apparent reason. You just wake up one day and you're in horrible, crippling 10 out of 10 pain in a limb or in chronic patterns across your body. Within a few years of that, we see explosions of leukemia, lymphoma. In parallel to that, we see Parkinson's in males, Alzheimer's in women, attention deficit and autism. And that all happened in my medical career. In 1992, I didn't see any of that. By 1998, everyone's in overwhelm. By 2008, doctors are throwing up their hands and committing suicide. Doctors have one of the highest suicide rates out there because we are so hopeless in the face of this deluge of disease that gets worse, and the outcomes are worse no matter what we seem to do. And so this is the dimming of the lights of humanity that end at really infertility and the loss of gender. And so we degender when there's not enough energy in the womb. And so if you don't have enough light force within the womb, the complexity of differentiating into a masculine testosterone androgen side or an estrogenic feminine side, that polarity takes a lot of energy. To differentiate cells and say, you know what, we're not going to just be ambiguous, we're going to go hard this direction. And you're going to do it multiple times in life. You're going to do it embryologically, and then you're going to do it at 2, and then you're going to do it at 5, and then you're going to do it at 10, and then you're going to finish it off at 18. You're going to go through these massive surges of polarity by increasing the amount of energy that you're putting into differentiating away from center. As energy decreases, ambiguity sets in at all levels. Neurologically, we can see it in the little nuclei within the deep brain where masculine expression of testosterone makes some of those nuclei really big, estrogen makes others big. We're now seeing brains that simply do not have big nuclei there, and there was no polarity that happened. So the brain doesn't know if it's masculine or feminine, male, female. It's not differentiating. So this is a biologic phenomenon, and unfortunately, we got a lot of people running around saying this is like George Soros or something attacking us with sociology. No, this is a biologic, predictable phenomenon of the decline of mitochondrial production of light. And so our society is diminishing its light and therefore diminishing our expression as a procreative species.
Yeah.
We can't procreate anymore.
The light, without the energy.
There's not enough light. And that happens most of all, and it's cool, fascinating and beautiful. Again, how does life happen? It happens from light. And so the conception moment when life begins is the most energetic thing that happens in biology. All of the eggs that produce the children you have and the energy they carry is so emblematic. Like, it's not hard to believe that humans are 10,000 times brighter than the sun when you see your children in action. They are just so bright. Those kids are just like, I still can feel it in my body, what it feels like when they're like climbing all over my head and they're swinging in circles on the swing in the house and they're doing the things and telling me 1,000 stories, and then they want to be flipped back and forth on the couch like 1,000 times until my arms and shoulders are so exhausted I couldn't do it anymore. Like, that amount of energy, that's what life looks like. And the reason we're not doing that at 40 in the same way at 4 is because your mitochondrial density has decreased so much by 40. Which maybe is good, because it'd be funny if I was flopping around here.
It'd be hard to have a conversation.
I mean, it'd be so much better because we wouldn't have to have a conversation. We could simply just be alive instead of telling people what being alive is. You know, you just simply embody
Just do it.
Just be embodied. Like, who cares about mitochondria? Honest to God. And I'm always amazed how much I talk about this stuff over and over again. But if I just would embody life, people would stop inviting me on podcasts. But I would be expressing it better. You know, I would be so much more effective as a human being, for sure. So we see this diminishment through a natural life cycle. You know, at the end of life, we have less energy than we did as a child, and we can't heal as well. And so you skin your knee at 90, and it can put you in the hospital from infections.
Oh my God, my Grammy was like with the bandages.
The bandages everywhere.
God, her
Skin can't even
was
hold
like
apart.
not even. It was like tissue paper.
2-year-old trips, falls, tears apart their knee. 4 days later, you can't even tell it even happened. Like, there's no scar tissue. It's just
bionic.
like just back to perfect.
Amazing.
That's what human life should look like. And so we get to see it for a short amount of time, and then we put ourselves in a divorce from nature. And in that nature deprivation, we lose mitochondrial density very quickly, just as you do microbiome when you stop breathing air, stop touching soil, stop being in the ocean. Nature deprivation leads to a collapse of microbiome, diversity and number, and that microbiome includes the mitochondria within our cells. And so we get this rapid decrement in life force and energy. And then suddenly, wow, that's fascinating. The very system that we thought was against us has been trying to nurture us and did nurture us into our existence. And the cool thing that we're finding out on regenerative farms all over the world and in regenerative clinics around the world is that health is so much more graceful than the disease. Health returns so quickly to a piece of land that has just not been sprayed with antibiotics for a single fall. Just one fall without spraying. Spring is just a new day. And so that's my promise to all of you, is that you will heal faster than you diseased if you will just reconnect to nature. And this is our opportunity, and this is why I love the meat grinder, because if I find myself in a meat grinder moment, then it's nature showing me that I was yet disconnected from her, and I was starting to trust something other than natural systems for my safety, for my security, for my income, for my social input. I'll tell you what my wound is, and I think it's common to all of us. I have a story that runs within me in 1,000 different variations, maybe 10,000 different variations, maybe 1,000,000, that I'm lonely. And it's absolutely physically the most ridiculous, ludicrous story that you could possibly come up with, because I'm not. I am surrounded by more people than you can possibly shake, and I'm a severe introvert. Yeah. And so the reason an introvert would create a loneliness dialogue or narrative or monologue to itself is hilarious. And I'm surrounded by people, and I'm surrounded by companies and projects, and like, for God's sakes, all I really need is to sit with a piano and play for a little bit alone. And yet, during that piano song, I guarantee you there will be a little narrative that will kick in of like, maybe you're unlovable, maybe you're alone, maybe nobody really knows you, like, and the narratives kick in. And so, I just want everybody to know that everybody feels this way. Everybody has the loneliness thing going. No matter how long you've been married, no matter, you've got 1,000 of them running all the time. These are the sub-programs of humanity as we got kicked out of nature. Therefore, we're deeply abandoned. And in that abandonment from nature, we believe we're lonely all the time because we have this root wound that we haven't healed. And so I just humor myself in my own ridiculousness all the time. I'm like, I can wake up in the morning and be like, wow, that lasts like 5 or 6 seconds of you feeling like a child, and you felt so good. And you were so excited about the day. And 5 seconds later, All the narratives are running. The program uploads. It's like your phone coming back on, little thing, and you're like, oh, that's good. I can't even. And then, okay, now I got emails and things. And in that wonderful moment, while the little mystery wheel is still spinning in your brain before you fully wake up, that's the only time you're you. It's the only time you're real. And then you upload the whole program again upon consciousness. And so we were in this wound. So I guarantee you we will destroy ourselves in the effort to find our humanness, because there's nothing more uncomfortable than not knowing yourself. And so,
when you say we're going to destroy ourselves, like, are you talking literally?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we can't procreate anymore. Like,
right.
We're done with
we're
that,
on a
so
timeline of...
We're on a tight timeline of that was the biologic end. So what's going extinct, I would like to differentiate life from human. Life is turning over. Life does this. There's been 5 major extinction events on the planet. And extinction in the human brain, because we're so anthropomorphic, says that's an end. No. It's a rebirth that you can't even imagine. And it's so much more beautiful than you can possibly imagine. Every time there's an extinction, nature goes logarithmic in her biodiversity, in her complexity, in her intelligence, in the beauty. Last one, we go from dinosaurs to birds to mammals to humans. That was an extinction that was necessary to allow the dinosaurs to remove reptile as the dominant expression of biology, to make room and imagination, because all the genes misspell under extinction stress. All the genes on the planet go and rewrite themselves into new possibilities, and then you've got deciduous trees and wildflowers that just didn't exist before the extinction. So extinction is a deep breath in and a breath hold. And if anyone's done breath work, you know how powerful that is. If you take a deep breath in and do a breath hold, and then expire and let it out and relax, the next breath is just ecstasy.
Yeah.
DMT, oxytocin, your brain's going like nuts. And all you did was hold your breath at the top and then let it out and then take one big full breath. That's what nature is doing right now. She's in a breath hold, and she does that by allowing her soil systems to die. So every 20,000 years, the whole planet desertifies. A third of the northern hemisphere goes into desert. North Africa, we call it the Sahara. It's only a desert every cycle. It goes back into the largest grasslands, and the whole Middle East is grasslands, and savanna, and China, and Siberia. The whole thing goes back to green. And then it dies again. During the desertification cycle of the planet, which we're well into, we're pretty much at the maximum breath hold now. The soil stops being the lungs literally stop moving, and you get an accumulation of gases in the atmosphere. CO2 goes up naturally. So that breath hold happens, CO2 isn't being breathed in, and then she takes a deep exhale, and then she takes this massive inhale, and Africa goes green. And the Sahara is green, and Saudi Arabia is green, and the whole thing's there. And so the earth is in breath hold. I think I'm in a breath hold right now, letting everything die a little bit further, let the Sahara Desert go a little bit further, let my narratives die out, because I don't have energy to keep up my narratives anymore. I don't have the mitochondrial reserve. I'm like, okay,
so
I'm the enemy, whatever it is. Like,
with all the projects that you do, and like your company, Ion, which maybe you changed the name of it.
Ion's right.
Okay, great. And Farmer's Footprint, and all of the things that you pour into to help us regenerate soil, help us regenerate our gut, help us to do this. Like, I listen to you and I'm like, so is that just delaying the inevitable in your viewpoint? Like, what's the, I mean, I guess my question is, what's the point?
Yeah, no.
And I'm really curious.
I agree with that every day. So we designed our supplement company, for example, to make itself obsolete. And so if you're not planning for obsolescence of a company, then you've created a crutch that's going to just delay the inevitable. So we started nonprofits out of the revenue from the company that would start regenerating the soil so that we didn't need fossil soil extracts as a supplement. And so we saw that. We're like, that doesn't make any sense that going to need that long term. We got to wait a short period of time for the soils of the earth to recover, food systems correct. So we've done, our best, and the interesting thing is our revenue is not huge, and so we can only do so much. And so we've gotten some partners and all this, but for as many people who have been affected by it, it's challenging to open up the economics that really scale that thing profoundly. But more companies need to start planning for obsolescence. And, whether it's a Tesla, like lithium batteries are a terrible idea for a planet that has no lithium cycle. We should have carbon-based energy systems because there's nothing more effective. 10,000 times brighter than the nuclear is pretty good. Why aren't we doing carbon energy systems? So I started a carbon energy company that's doing carbon conversion of agricultural waste back into all of that solar energy that's in there. And so you can do that. You can take plastics and tires through the same technology and get it to go. And this technology has been iterating for almost 30, 40 years, and it just hasn't gone mainstream, largely because we were using these old masculine archetypes of I'm going to build something and patent it and own it, and then I'll sell it. No, it needs to become part of the natural landscape. So we're having to relearn business, not just redesign products. Business has to start to become a natural system. So how does a technology start to seed itself across a world that every ecosystem needs closed loop carbon energy because it's the most effective, most efficient thing on the planet? So how does that start to look when you're not trying to scale a company and patent everything and then sell it for, what if it just becomes part of the revenue stream of the ecosystem or the community, and how do you build that? So that's what we've been working on. Yeah. Technology was relatively easy to build. It's been the social system around that technology that's been a crawl of how do we get energy companies, municipalities to start to think differently. And interestingly, Ecuador is starting to open its doors to this technology, India as well, much faster than the United States. And so I'm excited that there are little pockets that are saying, yes, we want distributed systems of energy. We want a natural system of energetics for our communities, because they're seeing the frailty and vulnerability of centralized power of a power company or whatnot. And so distributing this stuff through is an exciting thing. So the idea of seeding technologies rather than scaling technologies, the idea of really becoming biologic in our corporations as much as we're trying to do like 1% for the planet. We kind of need to do 99% for the planet, right? Like, bad idea doing the 1% in some ways. It was just it's such an emblem, I think, of the way in which we're so slow to actually change behavior. We decided 1% for the planet was adequate and going to be a badge of honor. Like, it's like, so you're 99% not for the planet, you're 1%, and now you've actually got an emblem that says 1% of the planet on your sticker, and nobody has cognitive dissonance over that. It's amazing. Now, the founders of that thing and everybody else is saying, hey, that was not enough. Like, we got to redo it. And so to everybody's credit, we're now realizing we should all have cognitive dissonance over anything that's 99% not for Earth. And so how do we start to do this? We have to have a lot of patience towards ourselves, towards our corporations, towards our communities. Like, wow, we got to really redesign everything within the template of nature. And fortunately, nature has given us that template. And so the way forward for me is to keep envisioning a future where I don't work. I need everything to go obsolete, including my need for monetary extraction from other people so that I have the wealth to maintain a big house and my car and all these things. And so what does that lifestyle start to look like? And if it's not like going back to the Stone Ages, it's a leap forward into a technology that I would call human. We're going to go extinct as our current biology. But if you look around at the behavior of our species right now, I think it's inhuman. We are radicalizing our children to murder one another across fences at 18 years old, and we call that a reasonable, well-justified war. We're trafficking children for commerce and sex all over the world. We are expressing inhumanity. And so thank God that's going extinct. We have this little window of opportunity to say, what if we were to become human? I don't think we're there yet. We're almost human. We were designed to be human, but we are not behaving like humans. We are behaving inhumanely. And so there is a great extinction coming of our inhumanity. And I believe there's a moment of rebirth for humanity to present itself for the first time. And that's what I'm holding my breath for and want to stay present for. Because there's a lot of days where I'm like, I've experienced everything. Why am I sitting here?
Totally.
What's the point? Like, it's ridiculous. Like, it's ridiculous. You look around something like Miami, and you're just like, there's nothing I can do to change the system. It's so ludicrous. Like, what? Yeah. I mean, can I really change humanity that feels like it's radically illogical to put latex implants into the butt to make it a different shape?
Or even like, Zach, the other day something came up in my third graders class and it was a tech thing, and I won't even get into the details. However, I sent a message. I'm like trying to be like a kind, normal, warm mom. I send a message like, hey, given that this is topical about like mental health and our kids and their safety and like tech, I'd love to open up this conversation, to talk about like how we can just, really support their well-being, like mentally and emotionally, and like keep them, in their imaginations and their whatever. Crickets.
What's the point?
It's just like, how is it? There's 2 other moms. I love them. But it's like, I feel like it's so sort of like obvious or whatever that I would want to like nurture my kids' brains and hearts and keep them who they are as long as possible. And it's like, I guess I'm the only one. So then I just obsess about maybe we need to move to Tennessee or whatever. Yeah. But then there's also this illusion of like that wherever we go, there we are, right? That I'm going to end up finding something somewhere else, which is the same freaking thing where we started the conversation.
Sort of, but you will find nature somewhere else.
Yeah, no, I'm going to find better grass there.
We will carry our internal landscape everywhere.
Yes.
But the external landscape can change.
And it matters.
And it's the whole story.
Yeah.
Because if we reground into nature, which has no trauma, and so you actually haven't ever looked out in the world around you and said, I feel like I am because that oak tree is that oak tree.
Yeah, for sure. That's never happened.
It's never happened. That's amazing. You've never been able to externalize your crap on nature.
No.
It doesn't have a place for it to sit because it doesn't have crap.
No. Even if your dog is annoying you, you're still just like, it's pure love.
And whatever the dog might have is because humans took
100%.
control of it and separate from nature.
For sure. Yeah,
so we can
dog.
screw up other species for sure by removing them from their nature. But I think it's profound that you cannot ever externalize your trauma on a potent member of nature. Nature was designed to force the internal work to be done. And so when I start to go into feeling this chaos of like, oh, it's all my fault or it's all things, nobody understands me and I am lonely and all I have to do is look at a tree, literally for 3 or 4 minutes, lay down under the tree, look up through it, my whole neurology resets. Yeah. I'm a new human. I'm like, oh, I can't even remember exactly what I was anxious about, but obviously it was ridiculous because it's not here now.
Yeah.
And so you reset. And so I just want everybody to know that maybe Tennessee is the right answer, maybe, and that happened during the pandemic.
I'm telling Mike you said that.
Yeah. Oh, I'll talk to Mike. I got some cities for you guys to look at.
Okay.
Yeah, but no, it's so profound, and I'm just so happy that nature has provided us this absolute instantaneous reset. Yes. And this is why we go to the beach. This is why we go to the mountains. This is why we go to the desert. It's because we know we will reset something fundamental when we look out there. And if we become more conscious of why we're pursuing those nature experiences, we can start to design a world around nature again. So we need to become conscious of our only path forward now. If we're going to let our inhumanity go extinct and we're going to let humanity become expressed again, we're going to have to let nature lead our path back into our self-identity. It's the only way we'll find ourselves. We can't do it by looking at another human. It's just another isolated being that's going to reflect everything back at you that's not you, keep telling you you're something you're not, no matter how close they are to you. And actually, the closer, probably the more problematic. And so your spouse is the last one you need to like hold responsible for your, anything because you're way too close to the trauma. And so we all got to back up from each other and let nature intervene into our relationships and let nature become that ultimate metabolizer between us. And when we do that, we're going to find really rapid health, and our humanity will emerge. It's the Ubuntu thing, I am because you are, right? And so we will not know the I am until we are out in the other. And so when we continue to build cities of isolation where we only look at humans, and we make schools where 5-year-olds only look at 5-year-olds, we have not advanced humanity. But if we let those 5-year-olds sit under an 80-year-old oak tree and then go home and eat lunch with a grandmother, we'll have a different society in a heartbeat, different place.
Thank you, Zach. This was so great. I really appreciate you. Thanks for showing
Train
up
wreck
here.
right here.
In
through the
your meat grinder. It was so good. So
Nothing
good.
left.
Thank you. I'm getting at least one DM a week that says, when do the doors open for Relax Money again? I'm ready. Now, Relax Money is our signature neuroscience-backed methodology to help you get financially healthier. And we only open the doors one time a year for our live cohort. However, we are growing the wait list early. So when you get on the wait list, there are special bonuses, goodies, surprises, freebies. And you can get on there over at relaxedmoney.com/plenty.